Hello, good evening, and welcome to Prog Chattery 777. Well, Rush! Yes, I'm finally going to be chatting about Rush. A lot of my viewers have requested that I chat about Rush, and so here they are, the Rush chats. Yeah, and I don't know, I'm not sure why it's taken me so long to talk about them, because being as they are a Canadian prog band, they're the closest that I get to having hometown local prog heroes, which is kind of cool. So yeah, they were formed in Toronto, which is just about an hour's drive from where I'm sitting right now, and they're just a phenomenal band. Of course, we have Geddy Lee on lead vocals and bass, and he also developed a habit of playing synthesizers with his feet later on, so he's known for playing lots of instruments. Alex Lifeson on guitar. He's a phenomenal guitar player. Perhaps sometimes overshadowed by the other two, because Geddy Lee is such a good bass player, and Neil Peart, of course, is such a good drummer. You know, and they form really the ultimate power trio. I'm sure some of you guys up there would say, oh no, the ultimate power trio was Cream. Well, Cream only lasted about, less than 2 years, and Rush lasted 40 years with the same guys. And, throughout that 40 years, they made very consistently good albums. I can think of very few bands that managed to stick together as long as they had, let alone make consistently really, really good music. That's definitely something that is worth respecting. But they're also hugely, hugely influential. I think, Rush, you could really say, is responsible for giving progressive rock that harder edge. It's more rocking than a lot of the other stuff. I mean, they rock a lot harder than Yes, they rock harder than Genesis. King Crimson is obviously a very, very heavy band, but it's a bludgeoning, intense sort of heavy. It doesn't quite rock the same Rush music, the same way that Rush music does. But all that being said, Rush is one of those second-generation prog bands. If we get all historical right here, you could say that the original progressive rock movement came out of the late 60s and the early 70s, and it was largely a British thing. A lot of the bands were forming in London, and there was an interesting scene there where bands were taking that classical thing and the jazz thing and blending it with the rock, and there was all these different, it was like a melting pot of different styles and influences. And that was kind of the original movement. And then towards the mid-70s, there was kind of a second wave of prog bands that were coming from North America, from this continent. And, bands like Styx and Kansas and Dixie Dregs are a really good band, and of course, Rush. So, being the second-generation band kind of means that, they're not necessarily as innovative as, say, Yes, Genesis, King Crimson, Van der Graaf Generator. They're more kind of taking, reference points from those bands and bringing it to their own sound. And I think that is a lot to do with what Rush has always done. Fundamentally, at the core of what Rush is, it's a heavy rock band. It's all about, high energy, driving rhythms, and, it's rock music. And what they managed to do throughout their career is, they take the best of what's popular at the time and bring that into their own sound. Everyone calls them a prog band, which, they are by definition, I guess. But really, the really proggy period of Rush only lasted a few years. I guess you could say, 2112, Farewell to Kings, Hemispheres. I mean, that was like the peak of their prog writing, where they're doing those side-long epics, 20-minute songs, and 10-minute songs, and all the extended things. And shortly after that, they had switched gears, and they were starting to take influences from like the new wave stuff that was happening, bands like Talking Heads and Cars and stuff like that. But then they still brought that into their hard rock thing that they did, and the end result of all of the eras of Rush is that it's not necessarily innovative. They're not like the first bands. They were never the first band to do something, but the unique twist that they were able to put to whatever the popular music was at the time is what makes Rush's music very unique and very worthwhile. There's nothing out there that quite sounds like Rush, and that's a testament to how great they are. I hope no one gets upset there when I said they're not necessarily innovative, because that's never really what Rush did. They were never the first to do something. They took the best of something and made it their own, and it's still very unique, and it's still very wonderful, wonderful music. Like I said, I'm a huge, huge fan. I've got all their albums, and I'm going to be talking about all their albums, so that's evidence that I am a fan of Rush. Don't get me wrong. But yeah, and as we go through their albums, it's going to be quite interesting because they're another band that's changed a whole lot over their history. I can't really think of another band that's changed as drastically as Rush did. Genesis is certainly an example. Genesis went from being in that original, prog movement in England. They went from being at the epicenter of that to being like one of the biggest pop acts ever in the 80s. And I think with Genesis, that stylistic change was a little less forgiving critically. I mean, a lot of people turned their backs on Genesis and, this is, they're a different band now. Whereas, even though Rush totally changed their style several times, actually, their fans never turned their back on them. They managed to get through those stylistic changes without quite so much criticism. And that's something to be said too. Rush's fan base, they have to have like the most loyal fan base out there. It's funny. You always think, Rush. Oh, they're one of those bands. You either love them or you hate them. And I think there's a certain truth to that. But those who love Rush really, really love Rush, and so they should. Like Rush is an immensely talented band. Like I said, Geddy Lee's up there playing, 3 instruments at once. He's singing. He's playing the bass. He's throwing all the synthesizers on with his feet, and Alex Lifeson is an immensely talented guitar player, and again, hugely influential guitar player. And Neil Peart, he's one of those great drummers. Funnily, he's not one of my favorite drummers, Neil Peart. I still prefer guys like Bill Bruford and Phil Collins on the drums, but Peart's drumming is massively influential. You can hear Peart's drumming in lots of other drummers, and you can hear Rush in lots of other bands too. Like I said, Rush as an entity is hugely influential. They brought that hard rock thing to the tricky arrangements and the weird things of prog. They made it they made prog rock. They made it rock. Then you look at certain other bands that are of the prog distinction that came out after Rush, and there's no way that Dream Theater ever could have existed if Rush hadn't done what they did. I hear a lot of Rush influence in Tool, and Primus is another example. They'll very openly talk about how awesome Rush is. Heck, Primus's first album opens with a little excerpt of YYZ by Rush, so there's no denying that they had a big effect and a lasting impact on musicians all around the world, which is super cool. And yeah, just to reinforce my fandom of Rush, because I may be a little critical in some of these reviews. There may be times where we're going through the chats and I may make a dig at a lyric that Peart wrote, or certain stylistic things. But I love the band immensely, and I'm only critical because I really, really enjoy them. And I've actually seen Rush more than any other band. I think I saw Rush 4 or 5 times. I think 3 times in Toronto at least, once in Hamilton, Ontario, which is even closer to where I live, which was nice. And every single Rush show that I saw was utterly fantastic. It's the whole spectacle of it. The light show is fantastic, and there's all kinds of fun skits that they would do, and of course the performances were always top notch. They are a musician's band, and part of what they do is that cool, is the cool technical musical stuff, right? Those are kind of like, that's one of the pillars of Rush. It's got to be high rocking, high energy. It has to have some of those technical details, and lyrically, there is a lot of distinction with Rush as well. Of course, Neil Peart, the drummer, was the lyricist, and I like some of his lyrics. Some of his lyrics I'm kind of a little hesitant towards, but on the whole, it's just such a great package, and I can't think of any other power trio that's lasted as long and made consistently good music as Rush. So I think that's about all I have to say. So stay tuned for more videos. I'm going to be beginning at the beginning, of course, with their self-titled debut record, and I'll be snaking my way along all of the albums. So it'll be a long journey, just kind of like the Tull journey. It's going to take a while to get through it, but we will, and hopefully you enjoy. Thank you very much for listening to me ramble on almost incoherently, and you will see me in the future. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this. Take care.